doing right now, and all of you are on the front end of it because the rest of the world is kind of catching up right now. And the fact that you guys are here shows that you saw it first, and you are in for a treat for the next hour and a half. So everybody, give it up for Dr. Jordan Peterson.
Fine water, most of you are. So, I'll tell you what I want to do tonight. I'm going to try to get through all of the 12 rules of my book. I don't think I've managed that in a single talk yet, but maybe once in London. But I'm going to try to do that. But I want to give you a little bit of background, too, because there's two other things going on in my life right now that I'm trying to sort out, and I want to tie them together and use this chance to talk to all of you to further my thinking on all of these fronts simultaneously. So I got invited a week and a half ago to do something that was really an overwhelming honor to me. The Penguin, an imprint of Penguin Books in the UK, is putting out the 50th anniversary version of the Gulag Archipelago. Wow. And so, that's really something. Like, I think it's hard to say, you can say, well, I think that's the most important book that was written in the 20th century. And maybe it's not, but it's in the top 10. And it had an overwhelming impact on me. And I want to use the opportunity to write that introduction to do something that needs to be done, that Solzhenitsyn did. I was just in a debate on Saturday in Toronto. It's called the Monk Debates, and I think about 3 million people watched that now. And one of the things that I was attempting to get my debate opponents to contend with was the idea that just as the radical right can go too far, that's a claim about which there's virtually no disagreement except, of course, from the radical right, the radical left can go too far. And the historical evidence for that is, to call it overwhelming is to say almost nothing. And one of the things I challenged my opponents to do was to say, well, how do you know when the radical left goes too far? Because they can go too far. And, one of my debating opponents, Michael Dyson, he didn't answer the question at all. And not that he was compelled to or anything, it was up to him. And the other one said, well, when they become violent, which to me is no answer at all, because to say that people have gone too far when they've gone too far isn't helpful. Like, it's just, well, thank you. We're all of us civilized people, assuming that that's what we are against violence. So it's not a very deep analysis. But the problem is that trying to figure out when the radical left has gone too far is actually extraordinarily difficult, because there isn't something that appears to be a smoking pistol. When the radical right starts making claims of racial or ethnic superiority and then starts to really act those out in the world, you think, okay, well, you guys are out of the game. Like, that's not acceptable. You're not in the domain of civilized dialogue anymore. But on the left, it's not so obvious when things go off the rails, And one of the things I really liked about reading the Gulag Archipelago, not that I liked reading it, because it's not a book that you like to read. It's like a 1,700-page scream of anguish. It's a really intense book. But what Solzhenitsyn did, and I think it was something that no one had really done before him, was to lay out the evidence that the absolute brutality of the Soviet Union was not an aberration in relationship to Marxist thinking, but a necessary consequence of Marxist thinking. But the problem, of course, is that the argument spans something like 1,700 pages, and that's not concise. And I'm not criticizing the book because of that, because everything in that book needs to be in there, as far as I can tell, to in the world to survive, because there's things you have to do. You can't just sit there, you'll die. So you have to act in the world. And even if you don't die, if you just sit there, you're going to suffer. And so the antidote to suffering in the world is action. And what you're trying to do when you act in the world, you're a mobile creature, and your physiology, your psychophysiology reflects that extraordinarily deeply. What you're trying to do in the world is to make things better than they are. You know, if you're hungry, you try to feed yourself. If you're thirsty, you try to find something to drink. If you're taking care of your family so they don't suffer, you're orienting yourself constantly towards something of value. And so the first proposition is, you live in a value-laden world. Your frame of reference is value-laden. And essentially what you're doing is moving always from a place that isn't as good as it could be to a place that's somewhat better. And you see the world through that lens. You're at point A and you're going to point B, and point B is better than point A. And so, because if it wasn't, well, why would you bother with it? Why would you put in the time and effort if what you're moving towards is better than what you have? It's a matter of definition, even. That if you're acting towards an end, and unless you've decided to make things worse, and sometimes people do, if you're acting towards an end, you're acting out the proposition that what you're acting towards is better than what you have. And so there's no escaping the world of value. That would be proposition number one. And then proposition number two would be, there's also no escaping the social world. So if you act out a value proposition, you're going to do it socially because you're surrounded by people. You're not, no man is an island, as they say. And so if you act out the proposition that one thing is better than another, you're going to do that with other people, and you're going to cooperate with them and compete with them in relationship to that endeavor. If you go to law school, some people are better at going to law school than others. If you go to become a massage therapist, then some people have a natural talent for that. It's like, so what that means essentially, and I think this is a universal truth, I think that as soon as you implement a value structure in a social situation, you produce a hierarchy. And I think that we know that. I think that's reflected in phenomena like the Pareto distribution and Price's law. That you formulate a hierarchy. Some people are better at whatever the hierarchy is than others, and most people start to stack up at the bottom. So you get disproportionate success at the top among a minority. And that's a well-established, that's what Marx observed, even though he made a specific case of it. You know, he said, wealth would tend to accumulate in the hands of fewer and fewer people. He meant the same people across time, and he thought it was only wealth, as far as I can tell. And he made a number of other mistakes, which I'll get to at a moment. So, okay, so you have to act out value in the world, and if you do so, you're going to produce a hierarchy. And if you produce a hierarchy, you're going to produce winners and losers. And that actually is a problem. Because, and this is the left-wing element of it, is that it's actually quite painful that your hierarchies produce losers. Especially if they really lose, because if you lose enough, if you're way down at zero, then you don't have enough to eat. You don't have medical care. Like, it gets fatal. It's happened. It's happened. And so, not because it's logically appropriate. Anyways, there's lots of hierarchies. And so, I thought about that for a long time, the fact that there were lots of hierarchies, because what it means is that the reality that we face isn't the reality of a hierarchy. It's reality of a set of possible hierarchies. And the rules that govern operation in a reality that consists of a set of hierarchies aren't the same rules that govern success in a hierarchy. So, and I can give you a quick example of that. So, imagine you have a child who's playing a game, soccer, let's say, or hockey. Since it's Boston and I'm Canadian, hockey. So, you know, your kid is out playing hockey, and maybe he's a half-decent hockey player, but he's a little stingy with the puck, and you know, he plays a hard game, and he does it well, and he comes off the ice, and they lose, and he smashes his stick down on the cement and has a little temper tantrum. And, you know, you have some sense, so you take him aside and you say, look, kid, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose. It's how you play the game. And he's not happy to hear that, because he's kind of having a bit of a pout, and he looks at you like, there's something wrong with you, and he doesn't know what you mean, because of course he's trying to win, and you probably encouraged him to win. And so when you come out and say, well, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose, it matters how you play the game, he doesn't know what you mean, and then when he asks you what you mean, you don't know. Right, because what you don't know is that you're outlining the rules for victory across the set of all possible hierarchies, not the rules for victory within one instance of one hierarchy. And what you're basically telling your child is, don't sacrifice the manner in which you would behave to win the set of all possible games for victory in one particular game. And that's because life isn't a hockey game. It's also not a series of hockey games. It's more like a series of hockey games than like one game. But life is a series of hierarchies. It's a series of games. And you might say, well, how do you win a series of games? And one answer to that is you get invited to play a lot of them. Difficult for anybody to guess is that there's an almost indefinite number of ways of interpreting the world. And that's kind of what the postmodernists stumbled upon, I would say, in the 1960s. They thought, well, how do you know how you should interpret a book, like a piece of fiction? There's as many ways to interpret a piece of fiction as there are people. Well, how can there be any stable way of interpreting it? And if there's no stable way of interpreting it, well, how do you rank order interpretations? How do you know one interpretation is better than the other? Well, their answer was, well, you can't, and so you don't. And so there's no such, in a sense, there's no reliable judge of quality in literature. It's arbitrary. Well, the artificial intelligence people found the same thing when they're trying to make machines that could perceive the world. It turns out that the borders between things aren't so easily drawn. And when we look at the world, like I can see your outline, it's like it's no effort on my part, I just see it. But, you know, there's 3.5 billion years of evolution went into that. It's not like it's an easy problem. I can solve it, but not because of any particular talent of mine, right? I'm just the beneficiary of all the deaths and all the selection that went into that whole 3.5 billion year process. That doesn't mean it's easy. It wouldn't have taken all that death and all those years to manage it if it was easy. There's a very large number of ways of interpreting the world, but that does not mean that there's a very large number of viable ways of interpreting the world. And that's where the postmodernists got it seriously wrong. So, because you think about the constraints that are on you with regards to how you have to interpret the world. I mean, first of all, you can't just sit there or you'll suffer and die. So you have to go out there and act in the world, and that means there's problems you have to solve that are basically grounded in your motivational structure. You know, you have to eat, you have to find water, you have to find shelter, you have to regulate your temperature, you have to play with others, you have to find a mate, you have to pursue something that produces a certain amount of positive emotion, you have to avoid pain, you don't want to be too anxious, you come equipped with all of those systems, and they're all clamoring for your attention. And so you have to address those issues, or things are going to go dismally for you. And it's worse than, so not only are you governed by those biological gods, let's say, and are in some sense their plaything, but you have to figure out how to address those problems not only today, because you're not just going to be around today, you're going to be around today, and tomorrow, and next week, and next month, and a year from now, and 5 years from now, and 10 years from now. So whatever solution you come up with today, which might be, let's rob a bank, has to work 5 years down the road. And let's rob a bank might work quite nicely today and next week, but as a 5-year strategy, it's probably a dim one. And you know, we know that because you say, well, don't be an impulsive criminal. It's like, well, why not? Well, because it's a bad medium to long-term strategy. That's why not. It doesn't work very well. You know, so you use polarization manifesting itself in our society again. And I think the universities are to blame to a tremendous degree. And I think it's partly because the intelligentsia in the West has never properly come to terms with their complicitness in what happened in the radical left societies in the 20th century. Have never been sorted out properly. And when Solzhenitsyn published the Gulag Archipelago in the early 70s, it became for a time completely unacceptable to profess intellectual admiration for the Marxist doctrine. And I think most of this happened in France. The French intellectuals, Derrida, Foucault, the people who dominate the particularly pathological end of the social sciences and the humanities and the universities, played the sleight of hand and transformed that now all too toxic Marxism into the current version of identity politics that's playing out in front of us, where the proper way to look at the world is the Hobbesian war of every group against every other group, with a narrative of oppressor and victim laid on top of that. And that leads nowhere good. On the left, it leads to exactly where it's leading to on the left. It leads to college campuses that are so repressive that comedians won't go tell jokes there anymore. That's not a good thing, right? Because the tyrant is definitely someone who doesn't like comedians. That's one thing we can be sure of. Because especially if you have any authority, because maybe they'll kind of remind you of why you're not God and you won't turn into a tyrant. And that would be a thing to be devoutly hoped for as your level of authority increases, unless that's where you want to head. It's real and subjective experiences like meaning aren't real. It's not a strong theory, that, as far as I'm concerned. I think that you can make a very strong case, and I think you can make a case, a scientific case for this as well, that meaning is an extension of the sense of meaning that can envelop you when you're doing something worthwhile, is actually the most profound orienting instinct that you have. It's the most reliable thing there is. It's the most real thing there is. Now, I spent quite a bit of time studying how the brain works, and you do have instincts that orient you towards learning. It's a very fundamental instinct. It's called the orienting reflex. It was discovered by Russian neuropsychologists back in the early 1960s. You orient towards things that surprise and startle you, and that's what opens the door to learning. And you can optimize that process of learning. That's the zone of proximal development, let's say, or the zone, or the flow, something like that. And it's an indication that you're living on the edge. And on the edge is where you're a bit secure, because you don't want to destabilize yourself, but you've got at least 1 foot out there where you don't understand. And it's exciting. It's a tense and exciting place to be. It's the place that a good lecturer puts you. And it's a meaningful place, and the reason it's a meaningful place is because that's actually where you should be. You're secure, you're practicing what you know, but you're getting better at it all the time. It's a place where your adaptation, in the most real sense, is expanding at an optimal rate. It's a place where you're operating so that you're going to become wiser in a way that suits you now and you as you iterate through the future, in a way that's going to be good for your family, in a way that's going to be good for your community, so that all these things stack up harmoniously. That sense of meaning tells you when you're there. It's an orienting reflex that helps you identify where you should be standing, wherever you are, how you should be communicating, how you should be listening, wherever you are. If you pay attention to that, immersement in meaning, well then first of all you have a meaningful life, which is a very useful thing. But second, you are exactly where you should be, right here and now. And so that's a good thing to know too, because people say, well, does life have a meaning? And one answer to that is, well, it certainly has pain as a meaning. And no one disputes that, and trying to argue yourself out of that is not very useful. So we can certainly establish that whatever the meaning is, it's not neutral. But then we might say, well, what about the meanings that help you transcend pain and suffering? Are they real? It's like, well, it turns out they are real. They're the most real thing. Now, I think there's I'll close with this, but I can't develop it. It's too complicated. I haven't talked to my point, but I can tell you this. This is what it looks like to me. It looks like the idea of the King of Kings, the idea of playing fair even among rats, the idea of boldly confronting the unknown, the idea of facing the tyrant and restructuring it, Those are all reflections of the idea of facing the dragon and hitting the goal. Right? All of that, all those ancient heroic ideas and modern ideas that are associated with an emergent ethic, they're all variants of the same thing. They're all our attempts to picture what it would be like to be the proper human being. Right? And our religious stories are an attempt to portray that. Like, if you were everything you could be, what would you be like? Well, it's really complicated because you're really complicated. And all we can get is images and stories about what it might be like, and we can't articulate it fully. But it's what we're all aiming at. It's what we all need to aim at, because it's the thing that will redeem us from the catastrophe of life. And so, when I wrote Maps of Meaning, I thought, no, this isn't just a battle between two arbitrary ways of interpreting the world. One of those ways is wrong. It's the collectivist route, the tribal route. It's wrong. It just leads to catastrophe. It's not grounded properly in the structure of reality. But the idea of the individual who bears the burden of being properly, who faces his or her suffering, who confronts malevolence, who faces the unknown, who restructures society when it becomes too tyrannical, that ethic of fair play and courage, that's deep, deep. We're oriented towards it. It manifests itself in our instinct for meaning. It allows us to live with ourselves with a clear conscience. It enables us to do everything we can to move our families forward. It sets our social world right, and it keeps us a good distance away from hell. And that's what we need to do, and that's where we need to be.
Hour and a half with no notes. Pretty impressive, huh? All right, first off, we're going to give Jordan just a second to stretch his legs. To my friend without the job, are you going to take care of shit now? I mean, how much more do you want, man? If that was right for you, we're going to have a job. Is anyone here hiring, by any chance? Somebody up there hiring? All right. So here's what we're going to do. So we are going to do a Q&A. So you guys submitted questions on Slido, and there's literally like hundreds here, which I went through and I picked out some of the best ones. I'm actually logged into Jordan's computer right now, which means I could jump on Twitter and end this whole fucking thing right now. We've come quite close during this trip. All right, so we're going to do a little Q&A here. Everyone feeling good? We're all feeling good? There he is. Jordan Peterson, everybody. I got one for you first, because this is, I think, maybe our 10th or 11th show. And I'm not kidding when I tell people you're different every single night. Is that part of your plan?
Part of my diabolical plan.
All right.
I said when I told you at the beginning of the talk what I was doing, I'm trying to think farther than I have. You know, and it's really good to be able to do that in front of an audience, because then you can see if what you're saying makes sense. That's the secret of free speech in some sense, right? Because that's how you think. It's like, it isn't just that you think. You have to see if what you think works. And you do that by communicating to other people and seeing what happens and seeing what the consequences are. You know, I've been in a battle, in some sense, in Canada with people who are they're so careless that they think it's okay to introduce legislation that restricts people's capacity to communicate. It's like, I don't get that. It's a sin. You know, I've got embroiled in this political debate, let's say, but it's not political as far as I'm concerned. What's happened is that the politicians did something that wasn't political. They jumped outside of their proper domain of activity. It was like they went down to the constitutional level, or even lower than that, and said, oh, well, it's okay, we can mess around with this. It's like, it's not okay. You're not going to justify telling people what they can say on the grounds of some fictitious compassion, or even non-fictitious compassion for that matter. First of all, you're not that damn compassionate. You guys really got right in the United States, because in your country, the Supreme Court ruled that compelled speech was unconstitutional.
How do you remain so calm in the face of overwhelming closed-mindedness and personal attack?
I don't know if I do. I'm probably, there are times when I'm much less calm than I would appear in public, so my family has to put up with that. Probably most particularly my wife, who's hiding somewhere in the audience tonight. So part of it is that I have a really good support network. My wife is very much with me on this. So are my two kids, my parents, my in-laws. I have a good network of friends around me that have been watching me going through all this and criticizing me when they think it's necessary. And then I have all this clinical experience that helps. That when I talked with Kathy Newman in England.
So what you're saying
what happened, she clued me in very early in the discussion, because when I first sat down to talk to her, when the cameras were off, she was quite friendly and all of that. And then the cameras went on, it was like she was a whole different person. And I saw that. You think, well, that'd be obvious. It's like, don't be thinking you see obvious things, because you don't. It has to be bloody obvious before you'll see it, that's for sure. But I got lucky that day, and I thought, oh, I see. I don't know what's going on here, but it isn't what I thought. So I just watched her. And that's helpful if you don't know what's going on. Just watch her. And I figured out almost immediately that whoever she was interviewing bore no resemblance to me. It's interesting, people have asked me why I keep talking to journalists, and I think the New York Times article is a good example of that. And that was a strange experience, because the young woman who wrote that article, she hung around with me for about 2 days, and she was in my house, and my son walked her through my house, which she called a chamber of horrors. I think that's pretty true. It's actually quite beautiful, my house. So it does have some rough paintings in it, because I collect Soviet realist paintings. I know that's kind of a minority taste. But I keep them there as a reminder. So she was very friendly and very enthusiastic and very open-eyed and very supportive and very engaged, and apparently very little of that was true. And you might say, well, why bother talking to journalists? And when that sort of thing happens, first of all, it doesn't happen all the time. In fact, I've been treated more than fairly by many, many journalists. Like 200 newspapers in Canada a year ago came up in support of what I was doing. So you have to take the bad with the good, Can't complain about that. But more importantly, I think it's not so bad that people reveal their hands. And if you talk to people and you watch them and you listen, then they reveal their hands, and then everyone can see what they're playing. And that's happened to me 40 times probably, maybe more in the last 2 years. People come after me and say, well, you must be this, incarnation of a satanic figure. It's just like, have it your way. It's not true, and what's happened invariably is that it's been harder on the journalist than on me. And I'm not counting on that to continue. In fact, I have good friends who think that the New York Times piece basically sunk me as a respectable figure, but I'm actually not that concerned with being a respectable figure, so it doesn't bother me that much.
So you're saying you want to sleep with Kathy?
No.
Sorry, wife. If you could ask Carl Young one question, what would it be?
I'd like to ask him how the hell he figured out what he figured out, because I can't understand how he learned the things he learned. I mean, he might have just been incalculably intelligent. You know, when I read Carl Jung, I think that, because I read everything he wrote in the 1990s, about 25 volumes. It wasn't like I understood all of it, because it's tough going. And I've just never been able to figure out how he could figure out what he did. Maybe he had an IQ of 180, you know, like people do. 1 in a billion, you know, maybe he was 1 in a billion. So he could see things that I can't figure out how anyone could see. But, you know, it might just be incredible intelligence. He seemed to have a gift for imagination. Like, you know, some people are very good at articulation, they're very good at thinking in words. And some people are good at thinking in pictures. And he seemed to be really good at both. You know, he had a tremendous imagination and could dream while awake, essentially, and learn how to do that. And seemed to learn all sorts of things from his waking dreams. You know, and I can do that a little bit. You know, sometimes when I'm doing therapy with people, for example, I'll be listening to them and then a little picture will pop into my head or a little fragment of a story. You know, like a dream, it comes with imagery. And it's sort of in the background, and then I'll notice it. And then I'll tell the person, I said, look, when you said that, this happened in my imagination. And we can take apart the relationship between what they said and what happened in my imagination. And that usually sheds substantial light on what's going on. But he was an absolute master at that. So I'd like to find out from him how he managed that. And maybe he couldn't say, but I'd sure like to know. I've never met anyone like that.
So there were a couple questions here asking you to clarify enforced monogamy. Should we have people bust out their phones for this one? Do you want some recording on this? If you can do it in 2 minutes, and we'll throw it up on Twitter.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we don't want recordings of the whole thing, but if you guys want to bust out your phones for this one, just so we can get some video, that way you have a clear answer for this out there. Because, you know, our enemies respond well to reason, right?
Well, it's those who consider themselves my enemies. That's really more accurate.
All right, so we'll do this. So I'll ask the question, we'll knock it out.
Okay.
I think you got 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay.
So the question is, what do you mean by enforced monogamy?
Well, we can start by what I don't mean. I don't mean taking innocent women at gunpoint and handing them over to useless men, which is essentially the accusation. You know, and it was really interesting to watch that unfold. What I meant was that monogamy as something that's socially valued appears to be essentially a human universal. That doesn't mean that human beings are universally monogamous, because obviously we're not. We'd be serially monogamous, and some people are players and have multiple partners and all of that. But there's a strong proclivity across known societies to tilt towards monogamy. And the enforcement is social norms. Like, think about it. I can't believe that I even have to say this. Your son just gets married, and he comes home and he says, guess what, Dad? I've been screwing around. What do? You pat him on the head and you say, hey, good work, kid. That's my young man. Right? Well, no, you're not happy about that. And he doesn't tell you because he knows you're not going to be happy about it. And that's enforced monogamy. It's part of the social structure. It's like, what else is enforced monogamy? It's like, well, most people want a monogamous relationship. And if they enter into a relationship with someone, they're not happy if that person goes and sleeps around, right? Most of you would be happy if that happened. It's like, not being happy, that's part of enforced monogamy. It's part of this, and you might have noticed, you probably did, polygamy is actually illegal. You can't have multiple marital partners simultaneously. That's enforced monogamy. It's like, and it's an anthropological term. It's been known for 100 years by anthropologists, most of whom are left-leaning, by the way, because that's how it goes, that monogamous social structures are one of the ways that you keep children raised properly so that they have a relatively stable environment, and that you keep male aggression, especially the aggression of young men, under some degree of social control. It's not a mystery. The fact that I got in trouble for that is it's kind of a miracle. It's like, don't you notice that we enforce monogamy in like almost every way? And the same thing happens all over the world in all sorts of diverse societies. And then when we deviate from that there's a price to be paid. So that's why, like, I'm a New York Times pariah, is because I think that monogamy, all things considered, is a good idea.
When will you do a duet with Kanye West?
My people are talking to this.
Oh. That'd be funny.
You have a rule about not lying, so I made a question in there. I like this. Do you have any advice for someone who can correctly identify the good choice versus a bad choice, but has difficulty following through on the good choice?
You mean a human being?
I think so.
Do you know anyone who isn't like that? Everyone's like that.
All right, you nailed it.
Well, I would say that, the book is, I suppose, advice. I mean, it's not advice to someone like that. It's advice to everyone who's like that, including me. It's like, it's harder to do the right thing often because it involves sacrifice of the present for the future. It's a sacrificial gesture to do the right thing. This is why we evolved sacrifice. It's so interesting. It's one of the things I talk about quite a bit in 12 Rules for Life. It took me a long time to figure that out. I'm really happy about that. That the ritual of sacrifice, you read about sacrificial rituals, say, in the Old Testament, and think, well, what the hell were those people up to? Burn a goat for God. It's like, it just doesn't make any sense. It does so. It makes a lot of sense. It's one of the most fundamental discoveries that human beings ever make. It's absolutely unbelievable that we figured out that you could sacrifice something of value in the present to gain something of value in the future. That's the discovery of the future, right? That's the delay of gratification. That's the scaffold on which a complex civilization is built. We had to act it out before we could understand it. And so that's what those rituals were about. It was acting that out for thousands of years before we could say, well, what sort of sacrifices did your parents make to send you to college? And this is, well, here's what they did. We know what the sacrificial motif is. So it's difficult to sacrifice the present for the future because it means the foregoing of gratification. And, you need to be gratified. You need to eat now. You need to have some water now. You have to have sex now. And now is real. But the future is also real. So you have to learn how to balance the future with the present. And that's hard. And I would say, well, you do that the same way, you do that for yourself the same way you do it for a child that you care for, is that you discipline yourself gently. And the way you do that is by setting yourself tasks that are hard but possible. You have to get I laid this out in Rule 4, I think it is, compare yourself with who you were yesterday and not with who someone else is today. It's like, what you want to do is be a little better than you were yesterday. And you might say, what's a little better? Well, it has to be enough so that you're happy if it happens, but not so little that it's a trivial accomplishment. And then you kind of calibrate it. It's like, you're not interested in playing a game that you can win every time. You're kind of a fool under those circumstances. You want a game that you have a pretty decent shot at winning. But maybe that your skill improves while you're playing it, so that's what you do. You set yourself a task. You think, well, I can probably do this. It's a little bit outside of my zone of comfort, let's say. It's a little bit out of my habitual practice. But I think I can do it. I can do it tomorrow. I can do it for a week. And then if you can't do it, well, then lower your sights a little bit. Lower your sights till you better. And then you think, oh, there's my zone. I can improve at this rate. And you'll find that that's a meaningful place to be. You want to be at the place where you can improve a little bit constantly. And you can find that if you experiment. It takes humility, right? Generally, because you're not as good at getting better as you think you